Welcome to the Easier Way to Sell presentation of Close the Deal Without Selling. Here's your host and developer of the Easier Way to Sell, Ike Krieger.
Hey, this is Ike Krieger. Welcome back. If you don't already know about it, I'm going to share with you the existence of a professional organization for sales and marketing. That is Sales and Marketing Executives International, and we're going to have the CEO, Willis Turner, here to tell you about SMEI in our conversation later in the episode. We're also going to be covering habit transformation. Once again, we'll be talking about the challenges that we all face in learning a new habit and how you can learn this system as a new habit in a little different and possibly an easier way. The Easier Way to Sell calls on you to learn a new habit for communication. Changing any habit or installing a new one is never easy. Or is it easier than you think? Is it just based on your perception of creating a new habit that's giving you any grief you might feel? So let's ask, what is perception? Well, the definition for perception from the Latin perceptio is the organization, the identification, the interpretation of sensory information in order to represent and understand the presented information or the environment. Now, here's a more down-to-earth explanation, and that is if you're wearing glasses that have yellow lenses, you look through them at a piece of white paper, what color would a white piece of paper occur? Now you take off those glasses, and what color would a white piece of paper occur? Your beliefs, your attitude, or your environment create what occurs to be a reality. That's a perception. Now, what is it that makes you perceive a goal as attainable or not? Ultimately, your perception may boil down to whether you're a half-full cup person versus a half-empty cup person. And we know that learning a new habit is perceived to be hard. Now, you've been asked to use the YES formula as your new habit-based form of communication. I'm asking you to communicate differently than you have your whole life. I guess in some ways it's like asking you to change your dominant hand from right to left or the other way around. Sure, you could do it, but the right-handed tasks you'd taken for granted in the past, those would go through a period of being awkward and uncomfortable as you switch to your left hand. To adjust to a new habit, you have to maintain focus on your new habit. And although you might find yourself slipping back to your old habit, you would at some point make the transition. And I'm asking you to make that transition on how you communicate right now. It's time for you to use my model every day in every way. But first, let's change your perception of the system. You may have it in your mind that learning this system as a new habit will be difficult. But answer these questions and see if your perception gets changed. Can you memorize something that's 90 seconds long? Can you remember to ask open-ended questions? Can you write down a couple of those open-ended questions on a piece of paper so you don't have to remember them? Can you be a better listener? Can you focus on solving the problems of others? Can you give up the need to sell? I hope you noticed that those were all closed-end questions. Each of those questions require a yes or no answer. These questions do not promote conversation. These questions were asked purely for information. Did you get your information? When I asked you if you could memorize something 90 seconds long, I was referring to what the system calls the prelude and quick. This model was created to take away the stress and frustration of the traditional selling process. The traditional way to sell has no rules. I concluded that if there were rules that both you and the prospect agreed to follow, that would make the sales process less adversarial and more authentic. The model also needed a component that helped you avoid giving a scripted or even an off-the-cuff sales presentation or demonstration before qualifying the prospect's willingness and capability of following through on the deal. That's what the first 90 seconds of the system is all about. It's setting up those guidelines. Setting up those guidelines can best be compared to setting up ground rules in sports. If I asked you to think of a sport in which there are ground rules, I'd be less than surprised if a boxing match was not your first choice. However, a boxing match provides a perfect example. When the referee calls the two fighters to the center of the ring before the match begins, he says, "Okay, guys, let's go over the rules. No hitting below the belt, no headbutts, no rabbit punches, and when there's a knockdown, go to the neutral corner. Any questions? Okay, shake hands, go to your corner, and when you hear the bell, come out fighting." Those are succinct guidelines. The guidelines of the system are all you really need to remember. Everything else, all your reminders, all your questions go on your piece of notepaper. In your ground rules, you even get to say that you jotted down a couple things to help remind you to cover certain topics. Be authentic, be honest. But most of all, your whole task within this system boils down to you remembering to say the ground rules. You recite the prelude, you get their permission to continue, and then you go through the steps of quick. And if you're listening for the first time, welcome. And when you have the opportunity, I invite you to go back and listen to the first 10 episodes of the podcast. Everything you need to know about the theory and background for the easier way to sell is contained in those early releases. But for now, change your perception. Change your attitude toward sales and selling. Change your life. Share the ground rules. Write everything else down. And if change causes you uneasiness or frightens you, remember, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action in the face of fear. I opened up a box of files from a class that I conducted in the 90s, and I remember assigning a project to the class members to write a little note or essay or their thoughts about what they've learned from their class. So remember, this is nearly 30 years old, and this person is speaking about what they've gotten out of the program. I learned to ask questions and then be quiet. I found out that my theme song is "You Talk Too Much." I thought that people weren't listening to me. It turns out that I wasn't listening to them. I've learned that questions are the answers. My knowledge is valuable, and unless it's part of my job, I must avoid giving it away for free. I've learned to give prospects information they want to know from their point of view. I've learned to stop putting on a show, giving proposals, and overcoming objections. When I qualify and create rapport, my prospects will give the presentation. My prospects will do the closing, and my prospects will write their proposal. The Krieger training system is designed to work 100% of the time. Even Ike says it doesn't, but it's designed to. I'm not a baseball fan, but I learned that a Major League Baseball season is 162 games long. A Hall of Fame baseball manager named Tom Lasorda used to tell his players that every team in the league will win 50 games and every team will lose 50 games. It's what you do with the other 62 that counts. Well, that was fun to read. We're about to have a great conversation with my friend and the CEO of Sales and Marketing Executives International, Willis Turner. So I want to tell you a little bit about Willis before we get into our conversation so we can get right into the meat and potatoes. Willis Turner is President and Chief Executive Officer of the USA-based Sales and Marketing Executives International, Inc., SMEI. And SMEI is the only worldwide professional association for sales and marketing and was founded in 1935. Under his leadership, SMEI has broadened its scope to establish operations in China, in Europe, Mexico, Japan, Vietnam, and the Middle East. And as a keynote speaker on marketing, negotiations, and gamification, Willis leverages his worldwide business travel and association management experience to convey an informative and motivational message to audiences all around the world. Willis is co-author of 42 Rules for Engaging Your Members Through Gamification, the definitive guide for associations on this leading-edge topic. He's worked as an instructor in sales management at the University of British Columbia and also at the Sauder School of Business. He regularly teaches sales management and marketing classes in China and in Europe and in the Middle East, and has been a visiting lecturer at international universities, including the Sun Yat-sen EMBA program and the Law and Business College at HBUE in China. Wow. Very impressive. Let's bring on Willis right now. So I'm here with my friend and the leader of Sales and Marketing Executives International, Mr. Willis Turner. So first of all, I want to say hello.
Hi. This is a great opportunity. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I am looking forward to hearing from you tidbits and stories about what's happening around the world in the arena of sales and marketing. And first, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about Sales and Marketing Executives International and how it came to be.
So all of the sales clubs that were in operation in the U.S. to come to New York, they did that. They met at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel on October 17, 1935. What was officially formed then, incorporated in 1936. And Raymond Bill was one of the founders, as was Thomas Watson, the founder of IBM. They were at that table. So as we have moved now from being just a US-centric organization founded in New York, in the mid-'80s, we partnered with some universities and started professional certification programs for sales and marketing. So we have marketing management, sales management, marketing and sales certifications. Those have really been the beacons to draw individuals who are interested in showing that they are professionals, being able to put that designation beside their names, and meeting a very high standard of professionalism in the sector of sales and marketing. So those programs have really helped us then launch outside the US and become more of an international global organization. So today we have operations in China, in Europe, in the Middle East, in the US and Canada, and we're looking to spread into South America and to the African continent as well.
Excellent. In terms of the time period that you and I have known each other, which is really since the late 90s and going until our conversation today, what have you seen as the biggest changes in marketing and selling approaches since, let's say, the year 2000?
Well, I think as we kind of entered the decade of, the new millennium, we started to see a lot more technology being involved in the process of sales and marketing. And gone were the days of, the old backslapping, camaraderie, the cliche sales type person. And now we're really focusing on individuals who are either digital natives or willing to learn how to operate with sophisticated tools. And I can remember in the late 90s, I was actually, before I came on board with SMEI, I worked for a large multinational corporation in sales management. And we were given what was called the Mobility Bundle, which was a Dell laptop, a pager, and a CD-ROM. And ACT, which was a relatively new CRM product. And a lot of the up-and-coming salespeople really took to it. They just said, this is absolutely fabulous, having these tools. Some of the older people who didn't want to change put the laptop in the trunk of their car and proved that they were dinosaurs that were
my Dell boat
extinct.
anchor.
Yeah. So that was a big change, getting those kind of tools. And it's really morphed into what we have today in terms of sales enablement and more process-driven sales. And as Neil Rackham said in his spin selling, when you look into the sales pipeline, what you see is pretty murky water. It's hard to know where things are at. That was the old days. Today, we can look into the sales pipeline and we can actually get a pretty good reading of what's going on inside the pipeline.
It's just been fascinating, the changes that have taken place even over the last 10 years.
I think one of the most significant things that's happened in recent years is that customers and prospects are doing their research and they're actually making decisions before they even meet the seller.
Yeah.
And so we have to intersect the customer or the prospect at the point where they want to be intersected. And we have to come fully armed with the information, the data that's going to help them make a decision.
What a difference from, I'm going to go make a couple calls.
Exactly. And we're really now focusing on solution selling, partnering, customer-centric selling. We used to say these things before, but now we have to put some meat in the game and really perform. And there's no time now for selling that is old school. There's no time left for people who want to do it the old way. Dialing for dollars just doesn't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to think that a professional salesperson will keep sharp and keep educated and professionally developed, take charge of that themselves. A lot of big companies do a lot of training. It's actually the small to medium-sized companies that are the engine of the economy today. And so a lot of customers are relying on sales reps and marketing personnel from small to medium-sized enterprises that may not have the big budgets for corporate training. We need to find ways to access that kind of professional development and help individuals advance professionally.
Sales efforts, I believe, of many salespeople in the United States are affected by this negative internal dialogue about selling. When you ask somebody, what's the first word that comes to mind when you say salesman? A lot of times it's not flattering. You'll hear a pushy or used car, and no one wants to be perceived that way. So my question is, where in your travels around the globe have you found salespeople or countries with the most positive view of selling and salespeople?
Well, it's an interesting question because when I sometimes refer to the word cloud that Dan Pink put in his book, To Sell is Human, when he did some research on what are the first words that come to mind when you think of sales. And I think pushy is the biggest word in that. There were some nice words, but they were really small. So we want to make those nice words bigger. I'm not really sure if I could pick out one country where selling is, really a coveted profession. And I'll give you an example of, we have some programs that are running at a university in Vietnam, and we have an option for students to choose an elective between sales and marketing. And 90% of the students pick marketing. But when you look at their careers path after they leave school, most of them will end up in sales.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a perception of the word selling or sales. It's just not sexy. People are focused on, they think, well, marketing is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
What a lot of them don't understand is that sales is a component of marketing. Marketing is actually the profession. Sales is a component of it, marketing. And the two need to work hand in hand. There's so much synergy that needs to be developed between sales and marketing. While it's great that these young people want to learn more about marketing, I think they would do really well to learn about sales and marketing. And so I don't know if there is an answer to your question
Okay,
as to,
well,
to
I
one country
found-
that stands out. I think it's pretty universal.
Who else but someone who travels the globe in the name of sales and marketing professionals could I have asked that question? The fact that we're going, shows me that the universal head gains seem to be, spread out rather evenly. Is there anywhere you found where salespeople are taught to listen more than they talk?
Well, I hear this, and I don't know if it's just something that is a Western thing that got exported, but I always hear this, you've got two ears and one mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear that in China. I hear it in Vietnam. I hear it in Europe. So people are aware of this. But I think if you look at the Eastern cultures, they're much more tuned into building relationships than we are in the Western cultures. We're after the quick fix. We want to go to the doctor and get a prescription that's going to solve our problem. We want to take a pill to cure it.
And make it all better.
We don't want to go back to the root cause and change our lifestyle. We that's way too much time to take. It's too time consuming. We don't have time for that. So it's not unlike, and I use this analogy when I was talking to the Chinese counterparts after a couple of meetings. I said, when you think about what we're doing here, would you liken it to building a very tall building in Beijing, where there's a hole in the ground and it doesn't seem like anything's happening for a long time. You walk by it every day and you don't really see much. Maybe a couple of years go by and then you start to see something happening at ground level. And then within about a year to a year and a half, you've got a building, and it kind of happens pretty fast after that. And they said, yes, that's China. That's how you go to work in China. That's how you do business in China. China's culture is thousands of years old, and it's deeply rooted in this concept called guanji, which is relationships. It's not what you know in China, it's who you know. Yeah. I think we can learn a lot from that in the Western culture. Under the communist rule in China, there were a lot of state-owned corporations, and so salespeople became order takers. They didn't actually have to sell because state or crown corporations bought from state corporations, and so they were just taking orders.
Clerks.
Yep, they were clerks, and they were following very strict policy guidelines. And so you'll see a little bit of that influence now in the modern sales culture in China, is that they're trying to recover that old culture of the relationships. It's still very much there, but the younger generation has been brought up under a different kind of a system, and they need to learn to become true salespeople and not order takers.
If you could wave your magic wand and make salespeople better at one thing, what would it be?
I would say that I would like salespeople to be more acutely aware of their personal brand. And this would help with the profession and the image. Personal branding is so critical today. And if you think about it in terms of the buyer looking for a solution, they're doing their research and they're seeing a lot of information, and they're actually looking at personal profiles of sellers, not just companies, but sellers, because they want an individual who's going to come to them professionally. When they see a professional personal brand, they equate that with a professional company. And I think that it's going to be incumbent on not just individuals, but on companies to help individuals with their personal branding.
Can you give an example of a personal brand that you believe is working?
Well, I think if you took the perfect world and said, this is a good personal brand, you would have a good profile on LinkedIn. It would not be a resume. It would be more of a story about how you solve problems. It would be a resource to your customers. It might contain some content that you've published, or white papers, or video. It would have some testimonials, maybe some mini case studies about how you've solved problems for similar customers. And your, not just the content, but actually the way it presents itself in terms of your personal profile photo, the kind of content that you are sharing. Is it positive? Is it upbeat? Is it apolitical in nature? There are so many opportunities for individuals to build their personal brand. It kind of breaks my heart when I see people that I think are great salespeople, but they don't work on their personal brand.
I was just telling a story about a marketing meeting that I was invited to as a guest. And I sat in there, and there were probably 100, I'll just say 100 people in there. There were probably a few more. But they did an exercise where they asked people, in terms of your own personal branding and how the world views you, what is it that sets you apart from your competition? And they had people write it on the back of their business card. They handed them all in, and the person running the seminar had their assistant count up the cards, and out of the 100 cards, 87 all have the same one-word answer of what set them apart from their competition. And I bet you can probably guess that was service.
Yes.
So here you have 9 out of 10 saying that what sets them apart from their competition is exactly the same thing that their competition says sets them apart from them. I always like to say, being better is one thing, but being different is everything.
Well, and I think too that, and when it's alarming that people would say that service sets them apart when a prospective buyer isn't going to discover that until after the sale. Really, the perception that is created between the prospective buyer and the seller is really the image, the personal brand.
Well, we as sales educators maybe have to do a better job at defining what it is that sets people apart from their competition, because if they're all reverting to the same thing, that would seem to be a fault in the programming of how they communicate as a salesperson.
Yes, and one of there's some really good statistics that were shared with us by a customer of SMEI that put their salespeople through the certification programs. They ask their customers to rate the seller, their salesperson. And it was a customer satisfaction index, but it was actually based on the relationship between the customer and the salesperson, not the whole company. And one of the things that they ask the customers is, what is it that you value most? What's the thing that you value most about the salesperson, the relationship you have with the salesperson? What quality in the salesperson do you want? Would you rate as the number one priority that you look for? And surprisingly, the answer was something I wouldn't have predicted. And it was, we want a salesperson that's easy to get a hold of. Which really means they want a salesperson who is responsive and who gets back to them when they ask a question. And you would think in today's technologically tethered world where we have, we're strapped to a smartphone with the ability to text message, voice message, email, telephone, if you would. That customers are still saying that is a number one priority, and it's something that was lacking.
Call me back.
Yes, call me back. And and I went to a trade show in Las Vegas last year. I'm going again this year. And it's a huge trade show. It's for the promotional products industry. And I can walk through that show And I can see lots of beautiful merchandise, well displayed. I can drop my business card. I can have my name tag scanned. There's an RFID chip in it that has proximeter location beacons. It's the show is well done.
Space age.
But when you actually look at what's happening there, it's a showcase where not so many people actually follow up on the leads. And this is a common problem with sales, is lack of follow-up. And I've actually gone, and not to that show because I'm not really a buyer there. I'm a trainer. I go there to speak and train salespeople. But I've gone to other shows where I could be a buyer, and I've left disappointed because no one contacted me after the show when there were products there that I was truly interested in. So I think that follow-up, that's part of the brand too, is professionalism, is the integrity of your personal brand, is, when you give me your card and you say you're interested, that's my cue. That part of my job now is to follow up with you.
I'm not surprised that people don't follow up. I am a bit saddened. I was giving some thought to our conversation, and my memory went back now nearly 20 years ago. I had the privilege of giving a keynote presentation to our SMEI convention in September of 2001 in Orlando, Florida. It was the week right after 9/11. And I know how I felt coming in, and I was delighted to see as many people there at the convention as we did. And I also was just amazed over the fact that there were only about 40 of us in the entire Disneyland complex because no one was down there. So aside from the fact that I really enjoyed the convention and I was in Disneyland with no one else, I guess it was Walt Disney World, Walt Disney. I want to know what your thoughts were and how this strange happening affected you and your planning and what your memories are of it.
Well, that was a kind of a momentous thing that we didn't see coming, and nobody saw it coming. And it was my early days as a CEO of SMEI. It was not the first conference I'd organized, but it was early days. And I still remember having an executive committee meeting by teleconference and trying to decide, should we go ahead with the meeting or not? And I don't know if you remember one of the speakers there. It's actually our board member of SMEI at the time. His name is Reggie Agarwal from Cvent, and he's the founder of Cvent. It's gone on to become a very, very large and prosperous company. And he was a speaker there, and he said there's 3 things that you can do to counteract what's happening. And that is, you can go out and shop and buy things as normal. You can hold meetings, and you can pray. Those 3 things. And he said one of the worst things you can do is stop getting together, because that's disruption that would really paralyze the economy. And that's kind of what terrorists want to see accomplished. And I still remember us having this was before we got there, we decided that we were going to go ahead with the meeting, even if some people didn't feel good about going. And we had about probably, I think it was around 40% of our audience canceled. And we refunded money with no penalties. The hotel was very good. We stayed at the Hilton right there at Walt Disney World. Mm-hmm. And the Hilton didn't charge us any penalties for not meeting our contract. In fact, we were the only conference in the hotel. I think we were the only people staying in the hotel. We had pretty much the place to ourselves.
Yeah, I know. My family were the only people in the airport.
Yes. I was on one of the first flights that was actually going after the planes were grounded to get down to Orlando and get things set up. And I still remember that. I still remember sitting in the airplane profiling people as they got on, because we were really rightly terrified that this could happen again. And so, but I'm glad that we didn't give up. I'm glad that we persevered and kept going. And the people who attended that conference still talk about it.
It was a great conference. And like you said, the fact that we were all able to get together and be a part of something that was important to all of us and wouldn't allow external factors to come in and say, you can't do that. I need to acknowledge you and the board for going, no, this is what we do. This is who we are. And, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. So I wanted, again, to acknowledge you for that. I've had a delightful time catching back up with you and having this conversation. And I was wondering if there was anything you wanted to say in closing.
Well, I would say if there's anything that I could say in closing, it would be this. If you're in the sales profession, think about your personal brand, how you can develop it. Take charge of it. Don't leave it up to someone else. And secondly, if you develop customers for life, in today's world, you're not going to work for the same company for life. There's no gold watches after 50 years anymore. We don't plan on that kind of longevity, and we don't look at career paths in the linear way that we used to. If you plotted out your career path as to how you got to where you are today, definitely I can rest assured that I could look at your career path and it would not be linear. And the future isn't going to be linear. But one thing that we know is if we are prepared as individuals and if we treat customers with respect as if they're going to be our customer for life, they could actually be our customer for life. It doesn't matter where we're going, which product or service we're going to be selling in the future. If they have a need for it, they could still be our customer. And sometimes companies don't like it when I say this because they think, well, that's not being loyal to the company. It actually is being loyal to the company because it's going to give the company the best results. It's going to give the company loyalty as well. Customers are going to be loyal to companies where the sales professional treats the customer with that kind of respect. And when you develop a customer for life, your personal brand will remain intact with integrity. And you won't have to worry about, well, I'm going to sell for today. I'm going to sell for myself. I'm going to close this deal because I have a quota to meet. I have a quarterly business review coming up and I have to meet my goals. And come high water or hell, I'm going to make this deal happen, whether it's right for the customer or not. You will not be able to hold your head up high if you go down the road and that customer sees you again. Your personal brand is going to suffer and you won't have the integrity. So I say, take care of your personal brand. Treat customers as if they're a customer for life, and you will prosper.
Well, I don't know on what better words and a better idea we could end up our conversation with than, treat your customers with respect, solve their problem, make sure that your brand is one that could be counted on. And I guess if you really want to get down to it, call them back.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Willis. You want to tell people how they can get in contact with you?
Sure. Well, one of the ways to do it is just to Google Willis Turner. You'll find there's only two of us that show up on Google. The other one is a comedian in Los Angeles. And I have a standing invitation to attend his shows, which I haven't done yet, but I should do that. That's how you find me. How you find Sales and Marketing Executives International is just go to smei.org.
Excellent. Well, I invite everyone that's listening to this to go to smei.org and see how this great organization might help you achieve the results that you say you want. It never hurts to be a little better today than you were yesterday, and SMEI helps you be that way. Thank you again, Willis.
You're welcome.
Take care. I'd like you to pay special attention to Willis's comment about your personal brand and ask yourself, what is your personal brand? What is the brand strategy that you have for your business? My experience shows that you probably don't have a personal brand, and you certainly don't have a brand strategy, and we're going to talk about that in our next episode. I want to once again thank Willis Turner for coming on the Close the Deal Without Selling podcast. And if you have any interest in SMEI, which I think you should, please go to their website and find out what it might do for you. This is Ike Krieger. See you next time.